really think?
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs and Kerr, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking. I'll tell you what got me talking. The weekend, did you see that? Some might say surprise announcement, some might say it was too long coming. I'm talking about Nadhim Zahawi, no longer the chairman of the Tory party. Full stop. Or it should be a full stop, but it isn't, because so many people, it's not enough. They're saying he shouldn't even be an MP. Where do you stand on that? Is it time for him to go altogether? Or do you side with a bit of Nadhim when he's complaining about the press and saying it's them that's to blame with their negativity? It's time now for a halt. Where do you stand on it all? Also, have you seen the news about the army apparently spying on us if we dared to differentiate from the government's path of locking everyone down for as long as possible? Is that their job, or is it a little bit of overreach? And £160 million in 1 year was spent on the so-called Aspen cards given to asylum seekers. Let's not forget, of course, this is on top of the billions of pounds we spend on hotel. I dread to think how much we spend on legal services and so on and so forth. Some people are telling me that it's outrageous because, get this, it's not enough money. Apparently, we should be giving them more, really. And when it comes to people out of work, how much of a responsibility is it of the government to get them back into work? Benefits, for example, how long should they be paid for? That is the conversations that I want to have with you tonight. But before we get into them, let's bring ourselves up to speed, shall we, with all of the day's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. Firefighters and control room staff have voted for their first nationwide strike over pay in 20 years. The Fire Brigades Union said its members have experienced a 12% drop in real terms earnings since 2010. Last November, members rejected a pay rise of 5%. And also today, we've learned that teachers are planning to go on strike in England and Wales. That's on Wednesday, after last-minute talks between unions and the government failed. It's expected to be the biggest day of industrial action in decades, with up to 500,000 public service workers, including train drivers and civil servants, also taking action. Union leaders say there's no offer from the Education Secretary on trying to bridge the gap and has squandered an opportunity to avoid strike action. But the Education Secretary says it was a constructive meeting.
We've been quite engaged over a long period of time, and clearly It's difficult because we want to halve inflation and they want to have rises that will fuel inflation. But we are having constructive discussions about future pay, about workload, about how to make sure that we can retain and recruit teachers.
Gillian Keegan. Well, the Health Secretary has announced £1 billion in funding to boost NHS frontline capability. Steve Barclay says the government will work to bring response times to pre-pandemic levels. The plan also includes 5,000 more hospital beds, 800 new ambulances, as well as expanding urgent care to take place in people's homes. Mr Barclay also says the government will publish the number of 12-hour wait lists. But Labour says the plans aren't enough to tackle the problems. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's been busy defending his handling of the Nadeem Zahawi row, saying he acted decisively. Rishi Sunak has been under pressure to reveal what he knew about Zahawi's tax affairs. The Prime Minister says he sacked the Conservative Party chairman yesterday, straight after an ethics inquiry found he had committed a serious breach of the ministerial code.
All these questions started coming to light about Nadeem Zahawi. I asked the independent advisor to get to the bottom of it and to provide me with the facts. I was able to make a very quick decision that it was no longer appropriate for Nadeem Zahawi to continue in government, and that's why he's no longer there. That's what I've done. It relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past.
Well, in news away from home, the US Secretary of State has called for an easing of tensions whilst he was on a visit to Jerusalem following a spike in violence in the region. On Friday, Israeli forces killed 10 Palestinians, most of whom they say were gunmen. And that's after a Palestinian man carried out a gun attack in East Jerusalem, killing 7 people. Anthony Blinken says it's everyone's responsibility to calm tensions rather than inflame them. Mr Blinken also says America's commitment to Israel's security remains ironclad.
America's commitment has never wavered. It never will. And today, the Prime Minister and I discussed ways that we can continue to strengthen our partnership and our shared security interests. We agree that Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. And we discussed deepening cooperation to confront and counter Iran's destabilizing activities in the region and beyond.
And lastly, the personal data of around 10 million JD Sports customers may be at risk after the company was hit by a cyber attack. The sportswear chain says hackers may have accessed private information, including email accounts, phone numbers, and the last 4 digits of bank cards. It affects orders placed with the company between November 2018 and October 2020. JD Sports says it was contacting affected customers. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. We're back in an hour. In the meantime, here's Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock this evening. And alongside me, I've got John McTernan, the political strategist and former political advisor to Tony Blair, and also Henry Hill, the deputy editor of Conservative Home. Welcome, gents. Good evening to both of you.
Evening.
Do you remember this fella, John? He upset you all last week. In fact, I can't just blame it on John. It was the pair of them, quite frankly.
We're in it together.
Yeah, they were in it together. Do you remember, if you're a regular viewer, they were going on about you having a... It makes me laugh. I shouldn't laugh because I'm sure it was a sensible suggestion, but taxing your spare bit
unearned wealth
on your private homes. Unearned wealth, says John. Do you remember that? Well, they're back again. Anyway, you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us here in the studio. It's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? A quick reminder, I want to talk to you about these Aspen cards, £160 million in a year. Went to the asylum seekers. What do you think to that? One of my panel says it's not enough. It's outrageous because it's not enough. I'll let you guess which one of them thinks that. I think it's outrageous, quite frankly, because I just think the whole thing is out of control. Ray says he was in the military for 9 years. And this Aspen card is only £80, basically his pension, is only £80 a month more than the people are getting on the Aspen card, Steve says. At this rate, he's going to get on one of these dinghies and come back to the UK and have the life of Riley, pretty much, in four-star hotels with your Aspen cards and all the rest of it. I probably won't be too far behind you myself, if I'm honest. Anyway, I also want to ask you as well, how much do you think it is a responsibility of the government and the state to help you get a new job if you lose your earn? Lots of the other things as well coming up, but that will give you a flavour of it. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address, or you can tweet me at gbnews or at Michelle Dewbs. Paul has been in touch, speaking of Twitter. He says he watches the show every single night, and you saw me at the boxing, apparently, on Saturday. So you wanted me to say hello to you, so hello to you. I hope you enjoyed the boxing. I certainly did. Right, let's get into our top story then, shall we? Nadeem Zahawi. We've been going around in circles on this one, haven't we? Should he go? Should he be jumped? Should he be pushed? What was the situation? Well, we know the answer now, don't we? Because he is no longer the Tory party chairman. But it doesn't stop there. Many people are saying that because he's conducted what's been called a serious breach of the ministerial code, then he should now go. He shouldn't be an MP. Apparently, he should resign as that as well. Should he?
I don't personally think so. He's resigned from the government, which is right and proper, or has been sacked from the government, sorry, I should say, which is right and proper, and that's the proper consequence for this. But personally, I think that's probably penalty enough. I think we should have quite a high threshold for withdrawing the whip, which is effectively how the Tories would expel him from Parliament. And also, to make a slightly broader point, I think if we want more people to own up to doing things wrong and to kind of get back to this culture where people resign and put their hands up, then on our part, that would probably require us to be more forgiving, right? We can accept that when someone's done something wrong and they've paid a penalty, we don't then press on and demand that they lose their entire career. Because if the price of being caught is losing everything, people are just more likely to double down, to hide, to send those threatening lawyers' letters that apparently Nadeem Zahawi's team was sending. So no, I think it's right that he's left the cabinet, but I don't think that the Tory party should expel him.
Oh, you're a forgiving man. Are you as forgiving as him, John?
Well, it's in the interest of the Labour Party that Nadeem Zahawi hangs around the Tory party like a bad smell. It's in the interest of justice that he goes and goes completely. What he's done is a joke. He's having a laugh at the entire country. £5 million he's had to pay to the tax authorities, which includes a massive fine. That's not careless, that is contemptuous, and he really should not be in a position where he can vote on passing laws anymore. He needs to be out completely.
Do you think that he should have... well, let me ask you the order of events. As you say, he didn't resign. He was pushed.
Yeah.
Do you think he should have resigned?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. So much of what Mr. Zahawi did in conducting himself in this case had made his position so much worse. Had he resigned, I think the impact on his political future would have been better, because he could have been seen to do the right thing. And if at some point between now and the next election Rishi Sunak had another reshuffle, he might have been able to bring Nadeem back in some kind of ministerial role. But the fact that he had to be dragged out by his fingernails and sacked by the Prime Minister, which is relatively unusual. Normally, you're handed the revolver and allowed to resign, means that yeah, absolutely, he made it much more difficult for himself than it needed to be.
But then you surprised me by saying all that and then saying, but, let him keep his job, essentially, his primary job of being an MP.
I mean, fundamentally, maybe I'm overcorrecting, but I think one of my big concerns about politics generally at the moment is that public attitudes towards MPs are so caustic, and, they're exposed to so much that I do want MPs to behave better, and I do want them to be more willing to own up to when they've done something wrong. But I think that part and parcel of that is that there does need to be a way for them to pay a debt without completely immolating their political careers. Now, he has been sacked. I think he'll languish on the backbenches, but withdrawing the whip, for me personally, maybe I'm wrong, it's not something that I feel particularly strongly about.
He repeatedly lied. Asked by journalists, he said there wasn't an inquiry into him. He clarified it later to the inquiry, going, well, people were asking questions, but that's not like an inquiry into me. He threatened journalists who were asking him to confirm something that was true. He threatened them with libel. That is unacceptable by a public... an MP should not threaten a journalist with libel when they're asking something that the MP knows to be true. That is intimidatory power. It's using your wealth. It's trying to keep the truth from the viewers, keep the truth from the voters. it's gone beyond, and the fact he had to be dragged out suggests that he didn't really believe his behaviour was wrong in any way. And that, you know, you maybe can forgive people if they accept that they were wrong. He's fighting this. He's briefing in the papers. He believes he's been badly treated. I think he should be kicked into touch completely.
What do we make to this? I think it's quite a bizarre practice of, you know, these public letters.
Yeah.
So Rishi's letter basically firing him, that's public, and then Nadeem writes back this weird public letter saying, you know, thanks, basically, you're amazing and I'm going to continue to serve you. But I found that in itself a very peculiar practice. But aside from that, one of the things that Nadeem Zahawi said in his letter is he's saying he's concerned about the conduct of some of the fourth estate in recent weeks. He references in particular one headline which was about the noose tightening. Do you think he's got a point with that, or is he just trying to pin his predicament on someone else?
No. Given the way the modern Conservative Party likes to talk about snowflakes, that's an incredibly snowflakey thing to do. I personally have very little time for people who think that using violent metaphors in the press is equivalent to actually threatening violence. You know, you get this nonsense in America when you say somebody targeted something and you're like, oh, what, like a gun? And you're like, well, no, obviously not. So, no, ultimately, I mean, Enoch Powell, I think, once said a politician complaining about the press is like a sailor complaining about the sea, right? Like, it is the job of the media to investigate these stories. It was the job of the media to bring this to light, which eventually they did, and I think it is absurd that he is continuing to rail against them instead of accepting that he did something wrong, and ultimately the journalists involved did their job.
Do you think he's got a point, John, in terms of the media behaviour?
No, I think he's trying to have a kick at the media on the way out when it was the media that actually exposed the truth about him. And there's still this unexplored thing, which is the reference, I saw Dominic Cummings made a reference to it, that Nadeem Zahawi is apparently under investigation by the HMRC and the NCA, the National Crime Agency. The more you have a kick at the press, the more they'll be going, what's that Dominic was tweeting about, the National Crime Agency? Maybe we should have a look at that. So I wonder whether the story is finished. And it wouldn't be beyond imagination, would it, that Rishi Sunak is too weak to take the whip from him and then is forced later on because something else happens. I just wonder if there's more to this story.
So this was a right-leaning newspaper that was referring to, I don't know, say a black MP or whatever, and was saying, like, the noose was tightening and stuff. Do you think people would accept that?
I mean, so some people might. I think that in you know, obviously all of this stuff is contextual, and although we're not in America, I think that would have a slightly different context to saying it in different. But ultimately, I'd still oppose people who criticise that, because I think it is important that, you know, using a violent metaphor in media is not the same thing as actively urging violent behaviour against someone. I think it's specious to argue it, and I think it's the same whether it's a left or a right-wing MP bleating about that.
What do you think to the media at home and the way that they behave? To me, a lot of this feels like a witch hunt. They won't stop. Who should replace Zahawi then, John?
Well, I really, really, really support this idea that's being floated that Boris Johnson should come back as the chair of the Tory party. It's not in the interest of the Tory party, but it'd definitely be in the interest of fun and the interest of the Labour Party to have a man who failed so spectacularly as the Prime Minister to come back as the chairman of the Tory party.
Why do you think it wouldn't be in the best interest of the Tories to have him back?
Well, two reasons. One is he's much more charismatic than Rishi Sunak, and he'd outshine him. But two, his judgment is completely shot to pieces, so he'd make terrible decisions. When there's only a very narrow path possible for Tory recovery, I think Boris would blow that up, because the only person he ever puts first is himself. He would never put the party first. He would never put the government first. He would never put the Prime Minister first. He'd put Boris Johnson first.
Boris Johnson, PLC, yeah. Do you think Boris Johnson could be the next replacement person or not?
As chairman? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, what are the two parts of the chairman's job as the chairman of the Conservative Party? One is to be the message carrier, to go out and do the morning media round and attack Labour. Boris Johnson is not a disciplined message carrier. You know, the idea of him getting Rishi Sunak's lines and repeating them on air is a bit ridiculous. And the second is to organise and oversee the Conservative Party's general election campaign. Now, Boris Johnson is a very good front man. He has an awful lot of talent as a communicator, but he's not an organiser. The idea of Boris Johnson going into a series of meetings, drawing up target lists, you know, talking to psephologists, apologists is absurd. So he wouldn't do either of the things that the chairman is actually for. What he would do, as John says, is he would outshine Rishi Sunak. He would use that soapbox. He'd become a more powerful rallying point for the many Tory MPs who are dissatisfied with Rishi's leadership. Like, there's no point. He might as well just stand for leader. There's no purpose in having him as chairman. Either have him as prime minister or nothing.
So who then? Who should be the man or woman for the job?
Well,
or person, or whatever
I like the suggestions that it should be William Hague. And if you're going to go and have retreads of former leaders, William Hague better than Boris Johnson. Theresa May would be a laugh as well. It's got to be somebody who's cool-headed, somebody who can actually handle all the inquiries on the morning round on TV and radio, and somebody who can do the organisational thing. That is really hard. That's why I don't think William Hague will in a million years take this job, but he has actually got the media skills and he's got the organisational skills, and that's quite a difficult thing to find. And there's not that many people. I mean, the reason I suspect that that Nadeem Zahawi is held on to so long by Rishi Sunak is there's a limit to the number of competent people on the front bench who can speak and walk and talk at the same time.
Well, one of the reasons that I would say there's a limit, I would be a bit harsher than that, actually. I would say there's a limit to the number of competent people in politics, full stop. But I would blame one of those reasons on the media. I think going into public office in this day and age, I mean, who would want to do it? You're going to get, like, literally every single inch of you and your family, let's face it, scrutinised to within an inch of your life, whether it's relevant to the job in hand or not. And I think, actually, a lot of it puts people off, good people off. And then you end up with an absolute shower, like we see more often than not now. But who should replace Zahawi then, Henry?
So, I mean, as John says, that finding one person who can do both sides of the role is very difficult. I think it would be actually perfectly possible, as has been done in the past, to have co-chairmen, and you basically divide the role up and you find someone to do the organisational side who probably most people haven't heard of and shouldn't hear about, and they're disciplined and organised. You can maybe raid the House of Lords for someone like that, or get someone from business. And then what Rishi needs is somebody who is a good communicator. Grant Shapps is someone who's very good on the morning media round and can do that, and is prepared to serve in his government and be loyal to Rishi's message. So if I had to pick someone off the top of my head for that brief, just the communications brief, I'd pick someone like Grant Shapps with the support of someone handling the organisational side of things.
Who would you like to see as the next Tory chairman? Tell me at home. Diana says, I do not think Zahawi should be kicked out of Parliament. He's had his punishment now by being sacked from his very important position. Can we all just give it a rest now? Done and dusted. Nadeem was right, says Carol, when he says his sacking was due to the media pressure, the fourth estate, he called it. When will the media call it a day over all this? It seems more and more the media seems to just be wanting their say and getting rid of people, and then the government cave in. I think that you've got a point there. Ken says Zahawi and the PM are here for their own good. Power and inside knowledge gives them an advantage to make decisions on their investments. Oh, quite the accusations there, Ken. Ivor says Andrew Bridgen had the whip withdrawn for far less, so please, can we keep a sense of proportion? I think he's got a good point there, hasn't he? About, is there a little bit of double standards, do you think, when it comes to taking whips off people?
I mean, ultimately, taking the whip off someone is a political decision, and it will always be made in the context of each one. So depending on how big the government's majority is, how much pressure it's under, we saw in the last Parliament the whip being given back to people from whom it had been removed for very good reasons, because they desperately needed those votes. So yes, there will always be a double standard.
Elise says, what about Andrea Leadsom? Apparently, she would be very good at the job. Anne says, no, we'll have Boris. You want Boris for that job. Often when I talk about things like this as well, people will say, Michelle, how come no one talks about Nick Brown in Labour? Everyone's talking about people that are not here or shouldn't be here or getting investigated, but he never seems to come up. I'm not ignoring that. I've tried to get answers to that, and I don't seem to get anywhere. We don't get much of a response. Do you know where Nick Brown's gone?
Nick Brown is not well, I think he's ill.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. That's news to me. Does that answer your questions? Because you ask me about that all the time. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, lots to get into with you. I'll have some of your feedback on that topic, but I also want to talk to you about things like job seekers. Whose responsibility is it? Is it the government's? How much and to what degree? Also, though, have you seen this odd news? I say odd, very bizarre. The British Army apparently spying on people who who dared to criticise COVID lockdowns. What do you make of that? We'll have that and more in 2 minutes.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs. I'm with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got John McTernan, the political strategist and former political advisor to Tony Blair, and Henry Hill, the deputy editor of Conservative Home. I've just been asking you guys, who do you think should be the new chairman of the Tory party? You do make me laugh, some of you guys at home, I have to say. Peter, to give you your credit there. Peter says, what about Mickey Mouse? You think that he would do a fantastic job? Saying nothing. Lee Anderson, that is a name that's coming through quite a bit, actually. What do you think to Lee Anderson, Henry?
I think the challenge with putting someone from the Red Wall in a high-profile post like that with a lot of responsibilities is that it would distract them from defending their own seat. Fundamentally, a lot of those MPs, they will get an incumbency advantage a first time, but they're under a lot of pressure given where the polls are. And so if I were Lee Anderson, I would probably want to have as much time as possible to spend in my own patch.
Got to say, I do quite like Lee Anderson. Anyone else out there agree? Do you like Lee Anderson as an MP?
Look, I think he's got strong opinions, he's got a character, that's one of the things you need, but I agree with Henry. People who've got marginal seats shouldn't be taken away from it. Chris Patten ran a successful election campaign for the Tories in 1992 as chair of the party, lost his own seat because he was never in it. If he'd been in the seat, he'd have stayed in the House of Commons. So it's a poison chalice for somebody with a marginal seat with these poll numbers.
Bob says, what about Penny Mordaunt? Richard says, what about Steve Baker? Well, we shall see, won't we? I think that decision will be made imminently, so our show will be discussing it when it happens. Right, let's talk about this then, shall we? I found this very bizarre, I must be honest. It broke over the weekend. I don't know if you saw this. This is all about, like, the civil liberties group Big Brother Watch. They basically had this great expose, if you ask me, which explains just some of the stuff that's been going on when it comes to people who dare to kind of go away from the government's narrative that everyone should terrify, shake behind the sofa and never leave their house and all the rest of it when it came to COVID. And get this, apparently the army were spying on critics, people as well. That were on the watch list include the Tory MP David Davis, the journalist Peter Hitchens and Toby Young, both of which, by the way, you will have seen on this show as well. Lots of bizarre stuff going on, John. Social media accounts being watched, dossiers compiled and all the rest of it. This 77th Brigade, so it's called Brigade, apparently involved
doing
as well.
Their job, defending our country.
Defending our country.
77 Brigade are on the front line of cyber warfare. They're fighting disinformation, which we know the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians are all around getting disinformation spread, and they will use any way to do that. And they will use British citizens to spread disinformation. We have to have security services to keep an eye on British people, because some British people are not patriotic, some British people undermine our country, some British people should be being watched by the police, the spooks, by 77 Brigade. And this attack by Big Brother Watch on our boys, and men and women, who are fighting on the front line against the Russians and their disinformation campaign, I think it's outrageous.
Well, I'm absolutely astonished by your view. I've got so much to come back to you on, but Henry, your thoughts first.
So I guess two things. The first of which is that the presence of the army. We use the army for so much now, given the failing state capacity.
Yeah.
You know, we use it to man the airports. We send it into areas with flooding. You know, so for me, the idea that someone would have called up the army to do some basic monitoring work in the middle of the pandemic, it doesn't necessarily strike me as sinister. I think the thing to a point which I don't think John pointed out is that disinformation doesn't need to be spread by malicious actors, right? That's the nature of disinformation. It can be people who sincerely believe stuff which has nonetheless been entered into the information ecosystem by foreign actors. So if you are trying to protect the UK from foreign disinformation, that will necessarily involve seeing the extent to which that disinformation is amplified and repeated by British citizens. Now, it doesn't sound from this story like there was much actual spying going on. It sounds like it was basically media monitoring, you know, reading tweets, reading published articles, compiling that information. That's not the same thing as, you know, tapping phones, having a van outside someone's house. But
well, not that we know of.
Well, not that we know. Well, no, but we can't, you know, damn the 77th Brigade based on stuff that we don't know. But media monitoring is not a particularly sinister activity. It's all stuff that these people were saying publicly. The idea that the government should want to know what they're saying doesn't strike me as unreasonable.
Yeah, you see, what you're saying, John, don't wash with me, because you're saying, oh, this is an outrageous attack on our boys, our men, whatever, the armed forces. I think it's actually an outrageous attack on people's liberties, free speech in this country. This whole COVID excuse was an excuse, if you ask me, for lots of it, to control people. Saying disinformation, you should be able to challenge and debate and discuss and critique policy, especially when that policy restricts your own liberties to the point where you cannot leave your house for more than a number of minutes per day as defined by the government. When it's battering the economy, you absolutely should be able to question and query that. And what happens is that the moment you stick your head above the parapet and dare have the audacity to query some of the decisions, you're slammed down as a conspiracy theorist, you're chucked off social media, you see a whole channels locked out, having their accounts withdrawn. That is what I think is outrageous, that bit.
So I don't think my good friend Toby Young and my colleague Peter Hitchens and my mate David Davis have been deprived of platforms to express their views on. They've not been censored.
Yes, they have.
They have.
Peter Hitchens himself.
They've not been deprived of platforms. He's been on Dewbs and Co. He writes in the papers. He's not been banned from the papers.
He references it in his own column, I think, this weekend, about how quickly he was removed from traditional broadcasting platforms because he dared to have the audacity to query lockdowns. You've had people like Majid Nawaz, which was kicked off his
Majid is a conspiracy theorist.
No, well, but this is, right, people call people conspiracy theorists.
Well, I've read his tweets.
What happens is months down the line, you then realise that what was actually being said and declared a conspiracy theory is actually, guess what, awkwardly, it turned out to be true after all.
Well, basically people's lives were saved and the economy was saved by the actions of the government. I do think Boris...
The economy was absolutely decimated.
No, it actually wasn't. We've not had a recession. We didn't have a recession despite lockdown, and businesses were kept in business. The thing is, I can believe that Boris Johnson demanded dossier after dossier on people who are being critical of him, and there's good reasons and bad reasons. The good reason is you need to know the lines that are being taken in a debate where the government want to shape a debate because you want public opinion to support you for the lockdown.
me.
No, I don't believe. I don't believe this whistleblower that the 77 Brigade were doing that. I do believe that. I do believe there's media monitoring and following what people were saying, getting the lines to make sure there were lines to respond to it. And I'm sure that Boris wanted some people looked at because senior politicians have access to these powers. Sometimes go like what are they saying? What are they saying? But I don't believe that David Davis or Peter Hitchens or Toby Young have been gagged, or any other critics of the government policy were gagged. They were wrong in what they said, but they weren't gagged.
Well, if anyone out there that dared to query some of these policies, you will know yourself, you don't need me to tell you, you will know all the things that was going on with social media. Your accounts were restricted, people were shadow banned. You know, we've had so much interference and stifling of those views of people that had the audacity to query things. And what I found fascinating, Henry, is how accepting so many people to this day still are of that. I think it was outrageous, some of the stuff that went on, and I hope that people stand up and say never, ever again. But there's so many people that were absolutely OK and cool with it.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, I think that one of the things that the pandemic should have taught people beyond reasonable doubt is that fundamentally the UK is not a libertarian nation, right? The biggest challenge of a hypothetical British democratic republic would have been finding stuff for all of the informants to do. You can poll the British public on almost anything and you will find that an overwhelming, like, I think 86%, for example, support a complete ban on smoking. You've got majorities banning lockdowns. One of my favourite ever bits of polling was in 2011 during the riots when YouGov polled what the public thought that should be done, and the only policy which didn't get 50% support was the army using live ammunition. Only 1 in 3 Brits thought that live ammunition should be used on rioters. So, no, ultimately, one thing that the pandemic has taught people, for better or worse, is that the UK is not America. It is not like it doesn't have a libertarianism in its bones, and lots of people do like these policies.
People will do what they're told.
Well, I won't. Never again will I have my life curtailed like that, to the extent. I always remember being told by the police I had to get off a bench. I was feeding my newborn baby at the time, and the police told me I had to move because it wasn't exercise.
The police went mad, but the police are mad.
Well, the police got told by me on that occasion, I can tell you. Anyway, give me all your thoughts on that. What do you make to it? I absolutely do believe this whistleblower, by the way. John says he doesn't particularly, but I do. And I suspect that there'll be lots more of this stuff coming out in the weeks, months. We shall see. Give me your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. Next up, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your response to that. But I also want you to ponder, whose responsibility is it to help the unemployed get back into work? Is it the government's? And if so, to how much? How long? You tell me.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, John McTernan, also known as the guy that's upsetting many people today. They say, what's the matter? Last week he wanted to tax us all on our spare bedrooms in our own houses, and now...
Well, to keep you in your house.
Yeah, he's saying that you don't mind the army or whoever it is spying on
I'm a
us.
patriot. I'm never going to deny that.
Well, sorry, yeah, also John, and also Henry as well.
Hi.
You're not upsetting people today.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, people are happy with you. I'm also upsetting people. Antoinette says, please, 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 can someone tell Michelle that her awful lipstick is a distraction and it's tacky?
That's not true. That is not true.
Jesus.
Well, I thought it was all right, actually, quite frankly. And if it's all right with you, I'll continue with it on my face. Right. Lots of you guys, by the way, thankfully, you do seem to be in my camp, which is you are a little bit concerned, to put it mildly, about this whole notion that you can be essentially spied on, have dossiers compiled against you, have your media platforms shut down, your social media platforms shut down. So if you ask me, it's good to know that there's some of you out there that still retain your common sense. Good on you, is what I say. Right, let's talk about people who have lost their job and trying to get back to work, shall we? Because 120,000 odd people are going to be given extra coaching to try and help them get back to work. I'm going to just cut straight to the chase on this. I can talk about it for ages, but let's just get straight to the point. When somebody loses their job and is trying to seek work, how much do you think the government should have a hand in that in terms of the Department of Works and Pensions, etc., job coaches, benefits, etc.? Thoughts?
Well, basically, I think one of the problems we often have in this country is that the Treasury hates spending money, even if it will save money in the long run. Now, the brunt fact of unemployment is that we pay for it. We collectively pay for unemployed people through universal credit and other forms of welfare. So everyone who gets back into work is someone who's not on welfare anymore, someone who is contributing tax to the economy. So I think the big question with this policy is the money spent going to be paid back more by the dividends of getting people off the welfare books and back into work? If that's the case, then this is a perfectly sensible policy.
The question to me is, when you say we'll get them off the welfare books and back into work, let's talk about these welfare books. How much of a safety net, if you like, a handout should there be for people that are able to work physically, mentally, whatever, able to work but not working?
Well, so this is the great economic inactivity statistics again, and you know there's an awful lot of them, and the government's very exercised about them. When you drill into the numbers and you break it down, an awful lot of those people are either in full-time education or they're retired or whatever.
Childcare.
So, but the number of people who I think are on out-of-work benefits and are just continually just not working is not all that big, and they are, due to the way the system is structured, given incentives and help to try and get back into work. And I think that's hard to object to because we want these people working fundamentally. And if we refuse to, the answer, all that would happen is they just stay on benefits, and all of us would be paying.
Well, they wouldn't, because if I was running the country, you say, oh, if they don't get work, all that will happen is they'll stay on benefits. If I was running the country, I'd have cut off. And it'd be a much shorter cut-off than there is now. I'd say, right, if you're physically, mentally able and capable to get work and you don't, well, guess what? Fund yourself. No better incentive, John, than people having their benefits withdrawn to them to suddenly get work. That's what I would do. What do you think?
The biggest disgrace that I found in this country coming back from working in Australia in 2013 was that there were food banks. What country is it where pay and benefits are so low that people need to depend on charity to feed their children? That's the disgrace. And this is just more punitive sanctions from a government that put too many people off benefits, punish them by removing the benefits from them. There's too much destitution in Britain, not too much generosity in the benefit system.
So you think that actually there should be more generosity within the benefit system. So let's just pick
benefits are too low.
let's keep this as like your people that can work but are not working. Let's just focus on that group for now. So if you can work and you choose not to, you think you should get more benefits, not less?
There's no evidence that people can work and are choosing not to work. The jobs they're offered aren't suitable. The pay is too low. There's vacancies in the health service, not because people don't want to work in the health service, because the pay is too low. There's vacancies in police forces because the pay is too low. The government has driven down pay, it's driven down benefits, and people are entitled to decent level of benefits and decent level of pay in their work.
But then where's the incentive to work? So if you raise these benefits, I mean, we could have a conversation, but for time reasons, we'll get into the nuts and bolts. But principle, if you raise the benefits, what is your incentive to people that are able to work to actually go work? If I can earn, let's just say, I'm going to be silly with my figures, so indulge me, but if I can earn, say, £100 a month sitting on my backside not working, and then I can go to work and I can get 120 quid a month, why am I going to go to work if you've just raised my benefits? I might as well stay at home.
People go to work for whole loads of reasons. For community, they go to work for self-respect. They go to work to provide for their families. There's not a lot of people out there who need to be harassed into work. The problem is the quality of those jobs that people are offered, the pay that people are offered, and the inflexibility of its ability to fit with their needs for their families. So I just don't think the choice is, as you're saying, between benefits and work, and people are going, I can just live on benefits. People don't do that. People want the respect of working for themselves.
When I spent my teenage years, in and around a council estate. I tell this story often. My then boyfriend was in and out of prison like a yo-yo. So many people around there were just I won't say what I used to call them, but they were people that were happy to live on benefits. When I decided I was going to get a job, I got looked at daft. Because people would be like, well, why would you go... Why?
Half of all the children being brought up in poverty in the UK at the moment have got working parents. Something is completely broken in the system, and it is not going to be fixed by a more punitive approach to 120,000 people who are claiming benefits.
Very quickly, do you think, Henry, that benefits should be increased?
On a case-by-case basis. I think the more interesting question, I take a slightly more cynical view than John, I think, is that you need to be much more careful with the taper so that it always pays to work. That was something universal credit was originally going to do. And also, you should acknowledge that some people, if you've been in a long-term workless household, work can seem intimidating, you don't know how to write a CV, and that's what stuff like this can really help with. Yeah, I think there probably are people who genuinely don't want to work, but I don't think there are a vast number of cases. And I think if there are cases where people just don't have experience of work, they have grown up in a workless household, and we can help them get into work through a programme like this, it's worth doing.
Yeah, you see, but you hit the nail on the head there, where you say when people have grown up in a workless household, I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't have it. If you are physically and mentally able to work, I do believe that you should be working. If you don't want to, well, guess what? You can fend for yourself and be on your own. There would be no such thing as the generational workless households. Maybe I am just getting a bit harsh in my old age. Give me your thoughts, GBViews at gbnews.uk. When we come back, I want some of your responses. I can see my inbox is on fire, so I'll have some of your thoughts. But get this. 160 million quid, guys. That is the amount of money that was spent on the so-called Aspen cards for asylum seekers. One of my panel, at least, I'll let you guess who, says it's outrageous because it's not enough. Goodness me, if I don't headbutt this desk by the end of the day, I don't know what I'll do. I'll see you in 2.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got John McTernan, the political strategist and a former advisor to Tony Blair, and Henry Hill, the deputy editor of Conservative Home. We've just been talking about people getting into work. Linda says, it's not that easy, Michelle. I am 65 and my husband is 64. Who would want us? Asked Linda. I think that's a shame. I think lots of people, David, for example, he's got in touch and said, Michelle, I'm 62 and I went back to work. I do gardening work. I needed a bit more money. So off he went and now he is a gardener. Good on you. I'll tell you who, by the way, has a lot of older people, I seem to notice anyway, shops like B&Q. When you go in there, those guys, they are like... fountain of all knowledge, aren't they? What they don't know about DIY isn't worth knowing. So I do think there are opportunities, but maybe I'm living in cuckoo land. I'm sure that you will be quick to tell me. Right, let's talk asylum seekers, shall we? Get this. £160 million in payments through a government debit card system. This is the Aspen card. Lots of you get in touch with me and tell me about these things. But £160 million in a year is the figure that we, I say we, of course you, me, taxpayers, have spent. What do you make to this, Henry Hill?
I said earlier that the Treasury hates spending money to save money, and I think ultimately this story is another example, because why are asylum seekers so expensive to keep in this country? Why do we keep having to find hotels? Why do we keep having to issue them cards? It's because, you know, we haven't invested in a proper estate of processing centres where they can be kept residentially and have their needs met centrally, right? So this, giving them was it something not very much money a week? I think it's about £40 a week or something. It's just not a vast amount of money. And if you want to deal with the actual problem in terms of the headline numbers, 1, you need to bring down the number of people coming here and staying on the estate. 2, you need to shorten the amount of time that they stay within this system, either by increasing processing or increasing deportation or both. Or you could allow them to work so that they could support themselves. But if you're not going to do any of those things, if you're going to keep them basically in limbo with slow processing, slow deportations, you do fundamentally need to give these people the means to live, and that's what this is.
Do you think this government is serious about stopping these boat crossings?
I think it definitely wants to. I think the challenge is, how do you do it? Because ultimately, you can't stop them leaving. You can't stop them leaving France.
Of course you can.
Well, I mean, the French could stop them leaving France. We can't, unless you want to go and occupy the Normandy coast.
But we have dual patrols now. We send tens of millions of pounds over to the French for them to stop it, so they should be stepping up and stopping more.
Yeah.
We have dual patrols now that have started, so of course we can stop them.
But if you intercept them once they're on our side of the channel, then they can't be returned to France currently.
But the French should intercept them before they've even got on these dinghies.
Sure, but it's not within the gift of the government to make the French naval patrols more effective, right? So the problem is what you do with them once they get here, and once they get here, we're under an obligation to bring them in. You can't leave them to drown. They get rescued by our Coast Guard, quite rightly, and once they're in the country, you have to pay for them.
This, I'm really sorry, this does not wash with me. You're saying, Henry's saying it's not within our government's gift to basically tell the French to stop them there. Well, of course it is. If we're going to give tens of millions of pounds to the French, then surely This has got conditions attached to it. You know, heaven forbid that you have some kind of targets or whatever linked to this, and if you're not stopping these boats, you don't get this money. It seems to me we give millions of pounds everywhere for absolutely very minimal outcome. Anyway, this whole Aspen card, let me guess, you're going to tell me that they should be getting probably 3 times as much than they currently get, or there or thereabouts.
This is just, it's a disgracefully low amount that people get. £40.85. That is less than £6 a day to feed and clothe yourself. That is a disgrace. This shouldn't be happening in our country. 80% of people who apply for asylum get granted asylum. So we're keeping people in poverty who are going to be living in Britain. They should be allowed to work. They should be allowed to, and they should be processed much faster. The average civil servant who's dealing with asylum cases deals with 13 cases a week. 13 cases a week. That's where the productivity issue is. Like, go and sort that out. But people should not, I mean, we should not be discussing this. We should not be attacking asylum seekers and refugees. They get a pitifully low amount of money. They're in poverty, and they're only kept afloat by all the church communities across the country who give so much support, food, money, support to asylum seekers. If it wasn't for our churches across the country, a lot of these people would actually be completely destitute. It's a disgrace.
Right, well, first and foremost, nobody is making these people come here. They're choosing to come here.
ISIS
so
are.
Is that
ISIS are driving people here, so are the Taliban.
What, ISIS are pushing people
Yes.
from Albania?
From Syria, Afghanistan, asylum seekers come from a range of countries.
So you're telling me with a straight face that you think these Albanian men are coming here because ISIS told them to?
78% of the Albanian refugees and asylum seekers get asylum when they come here. But I'm saying that...
Hang on, let me push
I'm saying that Syrian refugees, we've got a large number of them. Kurdish refugees after ISIL. We've got Afghan refugees who are betrayed by our government, bringing out pets, dogs and cats, rather than actual people who need to be brought out of Afghanistan to save their lives.
I would agree with you in terms of actually when you see those people in Afghan, I don't think we've done enough to help those people, to help get them out of Afghanistan under direct Taliban rules. I think we should do more. Completely agree with you on there. We got there in the end. I do agree with you on something. It was a long time coming, but we got there. However, I do think...
Hard for viewers to take, I suspect, but, you know...
Yeah, respectfully, I think you're talking absolute tripe when it comes to things like saying that this is appalling, we should be spending more, not less. To be absolutely clear, these people largely are in 4-star hotels. They do get their food.
They're not in 4-star hotels.
They're not in 4-star hotels. They are.
They're not.
They're in beautiful boutique hotels in many places. I featured some of the hotels in here. I know some hotels in and around where I'm from that are very nice hotels, wedding venues, and people have had their weddings cancelled. The hotels are so beautiful that people want to marry there. This is ridiculous. And also, when you say about food, they get their food provided at these hotels.
No, they don't. This payment is to people who do not get full bed and board. They're not in residential settings like this one near me locally in Peckham. They're not in residential settings where they get the food provided. The food is not appropriate when it's provided. But these are people who have to. These are people who have to feed. These are people who have to feed and clothe themselves during the whole long period when civil servants are failing to decide on their cases, and 80% of people get approval first time round, and 2/3 of people who get turned down the first time get approval the second time. Something is broken in the system preparing. Something's broken in our relationship with France. We can't do a deal with France. We should do a deal with France. We should speed up reprocessing, and the small number of people...
All I can say is, thank goodness for me that I'm almost out of time, because I got steam coming out my ears, ladies and gentlemen. You can't see it, but I assure you it's there. I'll tell you what's wrong with this country. Too many do-gooders constantly blaming this country for the problems, which really are not ours in the first place.
Imagine wanting to be a do-badder.
That's all I've got time for. I do have to wrap it up. Ooh, I think I need to lay down now in a dark room. Henry, John, thank you for your company tonight. Thank you at home. I tell you, ladies and gents, sometimes I think the world has gone mad. I'll see you tomorrow.
It's Aidan McGibbon here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. A band of rain is moving south over the next 24 hours with showers following, and for northern parts of the UK the winds are really picking up. An area of low pressure at the moment is affecting our weather. That's pushing into Iceland, so it's quite far from the UK, but it is dangling a number of weather fronts in from the north, and those fronts are, through the evening, sending some wet weather into Scotland, northern England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. The rain pepping up for a time as it pushes south during the late evening and early hours of Tuesday, but by the time it pushes into central areas, it is starting to ease again. And to the south, clear spells with, in some spots, a touch of frost first thing, but otherwise 4 or 5 Celsius. To the north of the front, actually increasingly windy with showers into Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Now, the rain in the south really peters out during the morning and clears away by lunchtime, so not much to that. And then sunny spells returning with highs of 11 or 12 Celsius. Feeling cold, though, in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 5 to 8 degrees with a strengthening wind. Cold enough for some snow above 400 metres across central and northern Scotland. And for central and northern Scotland, it turns even windier on Tuesday night with the risk of gales and 60 or 70 mile/hour wind gusts across exposed coasts of northern Scotland, especially Orkney, north of the mainland and Lewis. Risk of disruption from those winds. But there'll also be showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England through the night. Drier and clearer further south, but enough of a breeze to prevent a frost. And then a bright day on Wednesday in the south, whilst Northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland sees persistent rain at times. And in the far north of Scotland, after that very windy start to the day, the winds do ease and the showers become fewer and further between. Some sunshine reappearing. Cloudier skies for all of us on Thursday and Friday, but mild.